Hello, this is Ashaman. We are doing another interview with Steve. Spoilers for The God Is Not Willing. This is probably going to be a bit loose and informal, like Hurin and I are wont to do. So let's just get right at it. Hurin, do you have any questions to start us off? Or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, I'll start. So Rant is a fantastic character. I love him so much. I'm going to hold him and take care of him. He reminds me a lot of Rennick from the Karkanis books, who I also really like a lot. But my question is, how long has this idea of the Witness trilogy been in your mind? And was Rant, like the son of Karsa, and his mother always a part of your idea of that?
Um, I'm not sure. I signed for the trilogy many years ago. I think I was finishing up even Dust of Dreams when I signed on this stuff. But generally, what I do is I just sort of put it aside. I don't think about it until I'm ready to, actually tackle it. So I only started thinking about the Karsa trilogy when I committed to writing this first book, and then I had two false starts. So I actually had the opening of the second book and the opening of the third book already written, because I realized after the second time that no, I have to go back and explore the legacy of Karsa, and that's probably where I started putting together the character list that I would be using to do that, and that's probably where Rant came up. So it's not been sitting for a long time.
So it wasn't just like people got excited over the Karsa trilogy, and then you decided to troll them by not having Karsa in the first book.
and that was the thing, because I called it the Karsa trilogy, and I was going to pick up his story and move on, but I realized there was just way too much. He had too much wreckage in his wake, and so I think I did write an essay explaining that I was not going to be able to get to him, not only for the first book, but maybe not even for the second one. So it's a bit of a misnomer to consider it the Karsa trilogy.
The legacy of Karsa.
Yeah, well, it's the Witness trilogy. So Karsa is obviously central to that, but central in a thematic sense, not necessarily on the page. And I think I held to that fairly closely for The God Is Not Willing. He's there thematically, without any question.
And Coltane is too.
Sorry?
I was just saying Coltane is too, as he has been ever since the end of Deadhouse Gates.
Yeah.
How about Sarlis? So the last time we saw her in the Book of the Fallen, she was just some crazy lady who was raped and she got blood oil poisoning.
Yeah.
So I think it was an excellent choice to look into the consequences of Karsa's actions, and especially in relationship to her specifically. But like same question, I guess. Was she always on your mind, or was it just?
Well, I suppose yes. Once I realized that I would have to explore Karsa's legacy, that she had to become a part of the story, and then I had to decide. Well, do I abandon her in a sense, or do I do something about it? And through the Marines specifically, and the theme that is surrounding what the Marines end up doing, it seemed very fitting that it would be the Marines to actually do something about this, and her state. So it all kind of nicely fit in when I was coming up with the story idea.
That actually leads in really well to a feeling that thoughts that I have, especially about what I think is the thing I'm most conflicted about in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and that's how Sin's storyline ends in The Crippled God. Mm-hmm. So she is a very analogous character to Sarlis. I think you would probably agree. Survivor of rape and deeply troubled. She has her demons. And to me, in The Crippled God, like, it does feel like you abandoned her, in a sense. And that never really sat very well with me, because in the midst of this ending, there's like the Crippled God who's being saved, there's the Malazans that are being saved, there's Tavor that gets like really redeemed, and then in the middle of this, you have Sin, she's gone fully crazy.
She goes too far.
And Gruntle and Stormy just kill her. and
Gessler and Stormy.
yes, Gessler and Stormy. Gruntle dies. And okay, so leaving aside my complicated feelings on that, I'm just really happy that in this book, Sarlis gets another chance.
Yeah.
That she's like, people don't turn away from her like they did with Sin, and I was really worried because when I was reading, I was like, if he doesn't give this to her, then I'm going to be very upset. So, do you think that your thinking on those matters has shifted, or do you think he would still kill Sin if you wrote the Crippled God again today?
Probably.
You monster.
Yeah, I know. No, I don't know if my... I mean, how can one tell to what extent one's thinking has shifted? I just knew that for this story, that opening scene where Rand is fleeing, and then we get the flashback to the reason why he's fleeing. Once I wrote that scene, I realized that it cannot stop there. That it's one of those things when you create something, you realize there's an obligation to return to it, and it's a disservice not to. And so I knew that would be part of the story, and it helped to sort of underscore what my new thinking, if you will, on, it's not really new thinking, but what I wanted to focus on with the Marines, which was not going to be what people expected, but it fit very nicely with those characters.
And that also sort of leads into my next thought. So Malazan is a world where broadly the genders are equal. And I really like this because it makes a statement without being very loud about it, in my view. And the Book of the Fallen has many strong female characters, but I think especially in The God Is Not Willing, the women carry this book. Obviously the men are really good characters, but the ones that stood out to me most and the ones that hit me the hardest were the women.
Interesting. Which ones?
Okay, so it's been a while since I read
Stillwater,
it. So
Annex Fro, Sarlis.
Yeah.
Widow Dalus.
I forget her name, but especially the assassin who pretends she's not an assassin.
Stillwater.
Yeah. I really liked her. Emotionally, I think you did a really good job with them.
Cool. Yeah, Stillwater was, I mean, she just came alive on the page and took off. And I realized that, I didn't even think she was going to be one of the main points of view, but her voice just, it just took off. And I realized there's no way I could leave this character alone. Far too fascinating, far too much fun.
She has such a personality.
She's got a personality. Yeah, it's pretty weird.
And she's so interesting. And there's so much to dig into, I think. I think she's one of the characters with the most potential in the
I think I may have even dropped hints early on when I was writing this to people on my Facebook page, basically, wait for Stillwater kind of thing, because she was just something else, and was an absolute delight to be writing. And so was Annex Fro, actually. She grew on me as the story continued.
I really liked the ferret.
Which one?
Or was it the weasel?
Oh, yeah, the weasel.
I think it was a ferret.
The dynamic between the Malazan soldiers has always been one of the most distinctive parts of your writing, and I think The God Is Not Willing both continues in that and also revitalizes it. It doesn't feel like you're treading old ground with them.
Yeah, that was my concern. It was definitely my concern. So I had to really think in terms of how the military has evolved since the last time we were there, and how that evolution might be concentrated in the Marines specifically. So yeah.
That also leads into something, but I've been monopolizing this here, and you can go ahead if you have something to say.
I have some mostly lore questions that I don't think you're going to answer anyway. But so the Zhek have been like here and there, and we find out in the Carcanus books they've been there since the beginning, and they're shapeshifters, which probably gives them some sort of linkage to the Beast Throne and all of that. But is Warbitch related to Tog and Fanderay?
Yep, but I can't tell you to the extent of that relationship or the nature of it. But absolutely, yeah.
Another thing I really, really, really liked was all of your callbacks to Ikariam and the warrens that he created, and the coins that are called runts. Are those called runts because of Sin and Grub, or are they called runts because of Mappo?
Mappo.
And did he give it that name?
Who knows?
So earlier I said that something always makes me tear up when I think about it, and it's actually Ikariam's last lines in the novel. I think I remember something.
Yeah.
And it's always it hits me hard.
Well done in making a terrifyingly complicated magic system yet again that I look forward to attempting and inevitably failing to figure out.
Yeah.
Last thing, So when they heal Sarlis, we meet Anomander. Is that actually Anomander, or is it just like an illusion of Anomander?
Well, you see, immediately we're moving into the illusionist's curse, right? The paradox. The very thing that Benger falls into, where he's just doesn't know what's real. Is anything real at all? And I think in this case, you have to decide whether he was actually manifested there, or was this something that Benger completely made up? Because you can never trust Benger on anything, right? That's the whole point.
Never trust an illusionist.
No, never trust an illusionist.
Especially you.
That's my favorite section of the book, by the way.
Oh, that's cool.
Do you want to give us a tease for what continent we'll be on for book 2, or is?
Well, I know Niflrog
theories.
has insisted I have to be on 7 cities for structural reasons. But I actually, with the openings that I've written, I'm staying in relatively on the same continent, as far as I can tell. Now that may change. I'll revisit everything once I'm done Walk in Shadow, but I'm not thinking about it right now.
Okay.
I mean, I know where everything ends up, and it does end up in Darushastad. So.
Yeah, I was thinking with Niflrog, where you start there and then you go to 7 cities and then maybe you go to Lethris, but.
I think the conclusion is that Lethris is now a democratic paradise because Tehol is a philosopher king.
Tehol the only, yes.
Yeah. I will have more to discuss with you later if you come on again after Dust of Dreams, because I think there's a lot to dig into there. But that has to wait. I really like how... Okay, so the magic users have sort of deteriorated in quality over the course of the Book of the Fallen, at least in the Malazan Empire, because they've done a great job of alienating all those high mages. I really like how the ranks are now filled with small-scale magic users, who essentially, it's essentially like European colonists versus African tribesmen. That's what it felt like most to me, especially in the scene where they're assaulting the town and they get blown up by mines, and it's not a fair fight at all.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's and that's part of the. I mean, as wars evolve, they get more lethal, and so quite often fantasy settings sort of freeze everything in place. That it's just always going to be the swords and the bows and arrows and maybe the occasional lancer cavalry charge or something along those lines. But that's really not how the real world works, and so one has to think in terms of how a military is going to change and evolve. And sometimes those changes are technological, but sometimes they aren't. Sometimes they're, the remodeling of the army is a fairly consistent element in our history, in our this world's history. And for example, the rise of the professional army was the other one, which sort of brought about massive changes. So yeah, it's more a case of this is an evolving engagement in terms of military science. And this is, what Malik Rel has decided to do. It's not the first time. It was done before, but it was a bit too wild the first time round.
Yeah, with Kellenved?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the level of lethality has been ramped way up. And it makes it all the more tragic in the sense that one would wish to go back to, sticks and stones, because that reduces the body count dramatically. But that's not how sort of military science proceeds through civilizations.
It also makes things seem more fair, quote unquote, and honorable.
Yeah.
As much as you can have honor when killing someone. I also like how, in a sense, the deterioration of technology also caused them to advance, in the sense of they lose the Moranth munitions. They don't have reliable munitions, so what do? They make them into mines.
Yeah.
Another horrifying scene, by the way.
Speaking of Moranth, and especially Segula, we get a lot of the Segula in Cam's Orb Scepter Throne, which is my favorite of his, by the way. But I'm just pitching an idea, maybe like a Segula High series. We could see, like, their society and them fighting each other. Similarly, I think everyone wants to know more about the Moranth because they are fascinating. Like, what happened to them? Like, yeah, okay.
I want more Moranth, and I want more Thaumaturgs.
Well, you may have to wait for Cam on some of that stuff. We'll have to see.
Yeah. You're not the kind of author who caters to the demands of the masses, I think.
No, yeah. Much to my occasional regret. Yeah.
Sort of speaking to that, I had a discussion with another person on the Discord about the role of complexity in narratives, and he's of the opinion that you like complexity for its own sake, and I think in my view of you as a writer, I think that's almost entirely false. I just think that you're not willing to compromise your vision. And in the end, I think you actually try to make things as simple as possible within the constraints of your own techniques. So do you have anything to just say there so that I can come back to him with a witty retort?
No, not really. I mean, there's not much I can do in terms of a reader's assessment on these things. I mean, they're going to base that on their particular reading of a particular text. I think, if I think on it, I certainly don't go out of the way to create complexity. I think it's kind of organically grows up out of my writing approach, because I'm fascinated by subtext, and one of the dictating features of my word choice and sentence structure has to do with connotation, not denotation. So those are my particular fascinations. So I construct things so that they cast ripples out, and vertically as well. And that may deliver a sense of complexity that may complicate sentence structure. I'm not sure if it does, or word choice. But sometimes I'm looking for ambiguity. I'm looking for something a little less direct and concrete. Because I want the the water is made cloudy or muddied on occasion, so that when it serves as contrast to the clarity of other sections and wherever it is I'm trying to deliver. I'm sort of insanely meticulous in word construct or sentence construction and word choice, and it's been a lifelong as a writer obsession, starting with the short stories where you have to weigh every word in the balance and make sure it's doing its job. But then you have to decide, well, what's its job? And then its job becomes more complicated than simply the denotative meaning of a word. There's other things at work.
I think something that's a through line through all of your work is almost nothing is as simple as a lot of people want to think that it is.
Yeah.
And showing something that is complex, like human lives and society and basically everything in our lives as something simple would just be disingenuous.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the human condition is morally complex. One does a disservice, I think, to try to reduce it or to simplify it. You can create situations where that moral complexity is kind of reformed or reshaped into very simple choices. But even there, what may seem to be a simple choice in and of that moment can have, consequences that were never considered in the long run. So, as the writer, you may write a scene with that, and then you realize, well, actually, I can't leave that behind, because it is much more complicated than this character or these characters thought it was. And I think that shows up a fair bit in The God Is Not Willing, that there is a moral complexity at work, related to conquest, related to occupation, related to like military occupation, imperial occupation, related to cultural relativistic practices like slavery. There's an immense amount of complexity at work, and so these value systems are all about to clash, and that's what most stories are about in some fashion.
Yeah, and if I may, I think your historical literacy, if I should use such a term, also adds to this, because in the popular conception, people have a view of history as a set of events that we know about and was written down, and there's not much ambiguity. Whereas in reality, the amount of...
There's nothing but ambiguity.
Yeah, with when you're reading a primary source, you have to account for how much you can trust this person, like how much this was written for propaganda, how much they're just plain wrong with their conception of the world, and then you have to kind of piece these things together when you're missing half the puzzle.
Yeah. Which is, of course, what archaeologists always did, right?
Yeah.
You dig through the living floor of somebody's human activity at some point in time in the past, and all you've got is what they left behind, not what they took with them. And so then you got to try to piece together an entire culture on the basis of the things that they didn't value. Kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing a rather unique history course in my university at the moment. One of the exercises we did before... Okay, it's actually a role-playing game. We're playing out the French Revolution at the moment. But before this, we had an exercise where we were...
Sorry, you just sort of threw me there. You're role-playing a revolution where heads roll. Okay.
We're not actually executing people, but
Right, okay.
there have been deaths in the game. I'll get to that in a moment because I think you'll probably find it interesting. But one of the exercises we did was we were partnered up. Each of us was given a series of one-line tidbits about a relationship between two people. And then we were asked about our interpretations. Everyone was given different information, so everyone had very different interpretations. Then we were given more context. We had to do our interpretations again. Then we were told who was delivering this information. And then we were given the timeline for all this information. And at the end, I think we had some pretty good theories. And our professor never told us what the correct interpretation was. So at the end, we have a bunch of people with definitely incompatible theories that could all be very plausible based on the evidence. And how much you choose to trust this source and how relevant this information is to the question at hand. So I think exercises like that are immensely illustrative for what historians actually have to end up doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as for the game, I'm playing the Marquis de Lafayette. Having a load of fun. But the problem is, at the start, it's the conservatives had all the power, and the king is able to veto things. And I was playing a balancing act between the two the three factions of the Jacobins, the Feuillants, conservatives, and of course the section leaders of Paris. And recently the game has started breaking down because the section leaders have started riots in the streets, and all of a sudden reason and logical arguments have gone out the window because the people of Paris have realized that it doesn't really matter because they can get what they want through violence anyways. So it's a very real-time breakdown of democracy. Mm-hmm. And it is kind of like heartbreaking because I've invested so much into this game and into like drilling the National Guard. Mm-hmm. Like societies break down like that, and it feels very pertinent to modern society. And I think reading fiction like yours and there's lots of others is like so important because it really grounds the message in something that isn't so mired in today's politics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's go back to the book.
Yeah, that didn't have anything to do with God's Not Willing. I just kind of started rambling. I apologize.
No, it's fine. It's very interesting.
Oh, good. Glad you think so. I would be remiss to not mention how much your readers in general just love the character of Damask. Mm. And I'm wondering if Damask's character is supposed to be similar to that of Karsa, in that maybe the arc that where you're leading us towards for Karsa, where a man who did terrible things and he maybe is trying to make amends with that really unforgivable things.
Mm-hmm. Various characters will be trekking that path, and so I'll explore as many of them as possible. But I'm not going to give too much away regarding Karsa, obviously.
Yeah.
The Malazan Marines, when they are, or maybe this was the Malazan army, when they're being attacked by the Teblor, and then all of a sudden the flood comes rushing in, without a second's thought, they go in and try and save the Teblor immediately. The battle is over. They try and save as many people as they can. It sort of felt like they read the Book of the Fallen. I just want to know your thoughts on these Malazan Marines who have such depths of compassion to them.
In a way, I guess I wanted them to sort of represent a reminder. I think we see too many examples these days of the military almost being turned on its own populace and falling out of their original role as defenders and protectors of the citizens of a nation, and the first responders to disaster and all the rest. And so I guess a part of me wanted to just sort of go back to those traditional, very noble roles that the military once possessed, and still does, I think, in the minds of many who are in service, without question. But as we know, political parties and civilian authority, which oversees the military, there is the potential always there of abusing that institution. And so I guess I just wanted to sort of, raise the banner, if you will, of the moral and noble purposes that underlie the notion of an institution that is there to protect unarmed citizens. And that's why they make that decision, and why it's not even questioned, not questioned for a second. And I like to think that in our world, under similar circumstances, the response would be exactly the same. That's my hope.
Yeah, we're going to start wrapping this up soon, but
yeah.
a smaller anecdote that I have. My girlfriend had her bike stolen recently, and a few weeks later, it was returned by some Ottawa police officers who sort of just like in their spare time on the job just kind of go around and look for people's bikes. And it's just like such a wholesome thing to do. They returned it in the middle of the night because that's when their shift was ending, and they thought it was going to be it would be easier for them and for us to not impound the bike and just like deliver it to us on their way back. And yeah, I think it's really easy to forget. Like there's a lot of people that really have the intention to serve the population still, and I think that can be easily forgotten. Although obviously there are also bad actors in any system.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
As Ashman said, we should probably take up no more of your time. But before we go, is there anything, like, we're really, really thankful that you've taken this much time to talk with us, and I'm sure we could pick your brains for hours, but is there anything, like, we could do for you, or?
No, I mean, just keep reading, keep enjoying the books, keep discussing them. That's brilliant. No, it's I've enjoyed this session. I thought a lot of the questions were really, really cool, interesting ones I hadn't heard before, which is nice.
Awesome.
After all these years, right?
That's the hope. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, it was a good conversation. It was good stuff.
I'm very, very happy you said that.
Sort of a closing thought. I'm a big philosophy nut, as you might have picked up. Everyone else is sick of hearing me talk about it, I'm sure. But I just want to say, like, I really appreciate the depth with which you go to these thoughts. I don't know if you've had formal training in philosophy or not, or if you've like read books or anything.
I've read and read.
Excellent. Yeah. And yeah, I don't think there's I think the amount of people who appreciate that sort of stuff is in the minority, but I just want to let you know that I really do appreciate that you give so many good questions to think about in your writing, and I'm always challenged by what I read from you. So I just want to thank you for that, because that's very important to me.
Well, that's great. I mean, they're the questions that haunt me, and they'll haunt me to my dying day. So, yeah. But I'm not the first that these questions have haunted.
Nope, you won't be the last.
Yeah, and I won't be the last.
Thank you for haunting us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So shall we call it?
Yeah.
Alrighty.
When do you want to call him back next, Steve? After Reaper's Gale or Told Our Hounds?
Well, you choose. Probably Told the Hounds more than Reaper's Gale, I think.
Told the Hounds makes sense to me.
Okay.
Because it Told the Hounds kind of brings you guys back to, where it all starts, and that would be a nice sort of stopping point. After Told the Hounds, I think would be cool.
And it's also a hell of an ending.
It's my favorite in the series. We would love to someday also, I'm sure I speak for Ashaman, talk to you about Carcass.
Yes.
Maybe closer to the release of Walk in Shadow.
Cool.
Yeah, and I will take any opportunity you can get to talk your ear off, because I think you're just a really interesting guy.
I apologize for him.
I do this to my philosophy and history professors all the time too.
Right.
I just bug them after class. Anyways, this wraps up the interview we've had on The God Is Not Willing with Steve. Thank you, Steve, for coming on this.
Well, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have you on again. And from me, Ashaman, and Hurinfan, thank you for listening, listeners, and good night.